everyone, Christina here. Welcome to day 13 of the holiday card series for 2017. Today I'm going to be using some dies from Avery Elle. These are the Cityscape dies, and I'm also using the Christmas banner dies from Tonic. Starting out with that Cityscape die, and I've chosen to cut it out of some 5x7 cardstock, and I chose this size because I wanted to get as much of this city scene as possible, but I wanted it to be a tall portrait-sized card. So I'm using a 5x7 sheet of paper, and I've cut it to that size so that I can kind of envision where the city scene will be on the card while I die cut. Using some micro pour tape to hold that die in place while I run it through my Big Shot machine. So the cardstock I used today is some Neenah Classic Crest Solar White, and this is the 80-pound version. Or I'm sorry, the 110-pound version. And I just used my Tim Holtz craft pick to punch out all those center areas. I'm now using some Fabriano watercolor paper, and this is on a block, so you have to remove it from the block first and then cut it down. And I'm cutting this watercolor paper down to 7.5 by 5.5 because I plan to have my background scene run edge to edge on the front of this 5x7 card, and I want to have space on the sides to safely tape down my piece, and then when I trim it down, I won't have any white edges from the tape, if that makes sense. I'm using some Magello Mission Gold watercolors today. In fact, I'm only going to use one color. I'm using Cerulean Blue, and I'm going to wet my entire watercolor paper first before I bring in the color. So I'm actually going to speed up the painting process a ton because this took a while. I did a couple layers, but basically I brought in that color at full strength on one end, and then wet my brush and kind of pulled the color to the bottom. And I did tip my board back and forth quite a bit, trying to get that color to move around and mix and not leave a big line where it was applied, if that makes sense. I'm heat setting this to speed up the drying process. And then I'm going to wet the entire surface again and go in with a second layer of color. And I'm going to bring that color down a little farther because I liked how I could tip it up the other direction and it would pull the clear water down toward the bottom and push the darker color to the edge. And I also used a kind of a more drier, damp brush to sop up some of that color at the very bottom. As the watery color moved to the bottom of the paper, it kind of pooled at the bottom. So I just used a brush to kind of absorb some of that paint. So after I got it to this point, I put it into a box, and I'm going to spray it with some glitter spray. This is a glitter dust, and it's the color silver. I'm going to spray this right over the top, and I'm going to spray it quite liberally, and then kind of take the box away and put it under my open window in my office so that I have a little more ventilation. You don't want to really do this in an enclosed space, but since my camera is set up in my office, I kind of don't have much of a choice. So I just leave my window open so that I can kind of help some of the fumes go out the window. So I'm going to take that die set from Tonic now. I'm going to cut this using some Neenah cardstock. This is the 80-pound version of the cardstock, and I'm cutting out the banner and two words. There are three words in the set. They have Happy, Merry, and Christmas. I'm using Happy Christmas, and then I'm doing a two-step banner. So I need to cut the kind of ribbon end and that small rectangular piece twice so I could build my banner. And I'm going to take the words and coat them in silver embossing powder. So I'm going to put some adhesive down on this cardstock and pull up some of the stickiness with my fingertips, and then place the die cuts over the top. This is just going to give me a surface to work with while I do my die cuts. And there are a couple different ways you can apply embossing powder to die cuts. This is just one of them, and it's actually not quite my favorite. I'm going to show you my favorite way here in a minute, but you can definitely use this if you don't have tweezers or if you don't want to do it the other method. So I'm coating that with Versamark ink. And then I'm taking my sterling embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, and I'm scooping some up and sprinkling that onto the surface that I've coated in the Versamark ink. Then I'll heat set that until all of it is completely melted. The embossing powder on top of the die cut will probably melt first because it's a really thin piece of paper. It heats up a little faster, but you have to do all of it so you don't have like stray powder running around everywhere. then you can use something sharp, some scissors or a craft pick or just anything to pull that up away from the surface of the paper. And you have your die cut coated in the embossing powder. Now this is the other way that's a little bit easier, I think. You take the die cut and you put it face down onto your ink pad, and then you press it into the ink pad, pick it up with tweezers, and just take it over to your embossing powder and coat it in the embossing powder and then heat set it. Now where the tweezer is holding the die cut, it's not going to have the embossing powder. So you do have to do this twice. You just move where the tweezer is holding it, put it into the embossing powder, and then just zap it with your heat tool. Just super quick and easy, and you can't even tell that you were holding it with tweezers. The entire surface is covered in embossing powder. So I'm going to show you that one more time. I did that with the second die cut that says Christmas, placed it onto my Versamark pad, and I actually just stuck some Post-it tape to my fingers to help protect them from the ink. It was super easy to do. You could just use a regular Post-it for this. Then I picked it up with my tweezers, dunk it into the embossing powder, and then I'll hit this with my heat tool. I also like this because you can tap off the excess powder using the tweezers. You can just tap the tweezers on the edge of your embossing powder container. So I'm going to hit this with my heat tool, and it melts super quickly. Like I said earlier, because it's such a little delicate die cut, it does heat up quickly. I'm going to move the tweezers to a different section of my die cut. I'm going to just move it down to the just down below where I had it before, or maybe to the front. I can't tell. I think I kind of moved it around quite a bit. You do have to let it cool sometimes. Then I made sure I dunked that center area into the embossing powder. And then I'll hit that with my heat tool again, just until it's melted, and it goes super, super fast. So I'm going to actually start assembling the banner now. I'm adhering the words to the banner shapes using some Ranger Multimedia Matte. And I've actually moved that Multimedia Matte adhesive into a separate bottle that has a quill tip on the end. It was just a little bit easier just to move it to a completely separate bottle as opposed to replacing the tip, which I've done in the past. And then place them on the banners and put some acrylic blocks on top just to weight it down. And then I used some foam tape that I've cut into small rectangles and squares to assemble this banner. And when you assemble this banner, you're going to want to just use the packaging for the die set as a reference. That really helped me figure out what pieces go together. I then put some adhesive on the back of the banner and put some foam tape on that center area, since the two ends of the banner had 2 layers of foam, so it was a little higher up. I then cut down my watercolor piece. I'm cutting it down to 5x7, so it's the exact size of my card. And I love that shimmer. I love how that turned out. The shimmery kind of disguises if your gradient isn't perfect too. So I'm cutting down some cardstock. This is the 110-pound Neenah Classic Crest Solar White. Cut it down to be a finished card size of 5x7. So it was actually 10 inches wide by 7 inches tall, and then folded in half. Put some adhesive on the front of that card base, and this is Tombow Extreme adhesive. And then I pressed that watercolor piece directly over the top, and it was a perfect fit because I had cut both of them to be a finished size of 5x7. So I'll press that down, and then I put foam adhesive on the back of my little cityscape scene. I'm going to put this at the very bottom of the card. I'm going to place that at the bottom, and I'm also going to bring in that banner just to see where I'm at on the card design. And I decided at this point that I needed to add some additional elements. That's a really big card. It's 5x7, there's lots of space. So I brought in a Blizzard die set from Penny Black. I used this in last year's holiday card series as well, and I die cut that using some white cardstock. And then I did the same exact process I did with the Happy Christmas die cuts. I coated them in Versamark and then dunked them in some sterling embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. So now I have all my snowflakes coated in silver embossing powder. I'm going to adhere them, and having to put those little dots of adhesive on all these snowflakes, I think was going to drive me crazy. So I ended up using some spray adhesive, and for that one, it is very, the fumes are really smelly. So I did actually move my box over to right in front of my window so that I could put that spray adhesive on the back of the snowflakes without any problem. I did that for all 6 snowflakes and then pressed them down onto my card front. To finish off the card design, I took some crystal sequins from Darice. This is the 8mm and 5mm size, and I'm using a Lifestyle Crafts quick stick tool to pick those up. And then that same Ranger Multi-Matte adhesive to adhere all of the sequins. So that's the card for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you on Friday for day 14 of the holiday card series. Thanks for watching.